Hi everyone. I recorded this video in early February before the PSA SGC acquisition came to light. So if you're wondering why I don't mention that in this video at all, that's why. But ultimately, this video is not about mergers and acquisitions. It's about something very different. So it doesn't really affect the intent of this video, I believe anyways. So that's why I've decided to keep this video up and still post it. So just some context if you're wondering why I don't mention that at all in this video. Thanks for watching, and here now is the video. What's happening YouTube? It's Simon 466 Cards, and today we're going to talk about the big four in sports card grading, soon becoming the big three in sports card grading. And we're going to get into that. But first, I want to give a big shout out to Gemrate and Ryan there for all the amazing data that he's able to put out on a monthly, weekly, daily basis on his Instagram account and also the website that he runs. Shout out to him because he's going to be a big part of what I'm about to talk about today. So there are four major grading companies: PSA, CGC, SGC, Beckett. For the purposes of sports cards, I think one of them is going to become completely irrelevant very soon, maybe end of this year. If you were to look at this page, who would you guess? Probably guess Beckett, because they only graded 58,000 cards compared to 157 for SGC, 184 to CGC, and then of course PSA, the big monster. But it's not. I'm actually talking about CGC, and here's the reason why. This is total cards graded. I'm talking about sports cards, not the same thing. Because when you look at the sports card category, CGC is a distant fourth. They literally produce or create or slab up 3% of the cards that PSA did in the month of January. They're even behind Beckett, who's way behind SGC, who's way behind PSA. That's a lot of way behinds. And they've only been around for what, 3-4 years, and they haven't really carved out a niche for themselves in the sports card space. Now, that's to say nothing about their TCG space. If you look at the TCG side of things, you can see they're a strong second behind PSA because of their long comic book grading history. So this isn't about TCG or comic cards or anything like that, right? I'm purely talking about sports cards because that's what I talk about. And they're a distant fourth, and they just don't have the history behind their grading company, unlike Beckett, SGC, and PSA in the sports card space. They haven't carved out a niche for themselves. I think they're kind of done in the sports card space. If we look at the individual sports, you can see here for baseball, cards graded fourth. For basketball, fourth, at even 1/3 of Beckett, right? Football, tied for third with Beckett. Hockey, 2/3 of what Beckett does. So they just don't have a footprint in the sports card market, and I don't see them making a push and pushing behind these three guys. And I think that's why we're going to talk about these three as the big three for sports cards probably as soon as sometime this year. And this is the January data. If you look at the 2023 data, you can see here again for sports cards, they're behind Beckett and they're nowhere near SGC or obviously PSA. And that's just the data of how many cards they grade, right? They're not, it's just people aren't sending the cards into them. The other thing I want to talk about is customer confidence in their company. I want to talk about this thing that happened. Now, this is about CGC Comics, but it's about them finding a bunch of CGC comics being tampered with. Basically, people have found a way to replace comics and then reseal the slab, and people aren't any the wiser. And while this is a completely different arm of the company, you have to imagine that the way they slab up their comic books is pretty similar to the way they slab up their cards. And so I don't know about you, I'm just hypothesizing, but if they're able, whoever did this was able to find a way to crack a CGC comic book holder, why wouldn't they be able to find a way to crack a CGC sports card holder? And so, and I'm just speaking for myself, but I don't know how much I would trust the slab itself to not be tampered with based on the fact that it's happened on the comic book side. The comic book side came before the card side, so you'd have to think the technology and the process to slab up the card side would be based off of what they did for the comic book side. And they found a way to mess around with the comic book side, so why wouldn't they find a way to do it on the sports card side? I'm not saying that it exists out there, but it seems like if you could do it for one, you should probably be able to do it for the other, right? And so I, as a collector, would have a lot of concerns about whether or not the card that's in the holder, a CGC slab, would also be the same card that was graded, or if someone pull it out and put in another one. So that's the consumer customer confidence side of things. I don't know that this incident on the comic side makes me, as a sports card collector and investor, or whatever you want to call yourself, that much confident in the CGC slab itself. So that's talking about customer confidence. Also on the customer confidence side, we have this fun news from Paul Lesko, where he talks about a suit that's happening between CGC and a couple of people who work there. And basically, these two employees stole comics. You can see that they allegedly converted customer property, sold collectible materials in violation of CGC policy, and printed off labels. Basically, they stole and sold stuff and used labels to make their stuff seem better than it was for their profit. So, again, speaking to customer confidence, if they have their own employees stealing and or printing off their own labels, and one of these people, if you scroll down far enough, where is it? There was actually a couple, right? So the husband was a comic book grader, and the wife worked in receiving, verifying items from eBay. So that means this person was also dealing with sports cards, right? And so, like, again, to the customer confidence side, your slabs aren't tamper-proof on the comic book side, and your own employees are stealing stuff when you send them in. So, again, from a customer confidence perspective, not exactly gonna go to bat for these guys, right? It's just a lot of things piling up on each other. And then the last piece is an email that I got. Let me grab it. You can see here. They're opening a Tokyo office, right? They're opening a Tokyo office. Great. CCG to open Tokyo office in 2024. If you want to work there, like, apply now. Great, great, great. Insurance coverage for the shipping, yada, yada, yada. This is coming straight from them, from CCG or CGC, whatever you want to call them. But if you look at the actual image that they used for this announcement, do you see any sports cards here? It's a lot of non-sports cards. The one sports card they have is Shohei Ohtani, who just so happens to to be Japanese. But there's literally no other sports cards that exist on this page. So CGC or CCG is basically telling you, we understand sports cards are not going to be our bread and butter, and we're opening an office in a place that isn't really going to be tailored to that. It's kind of obvious what their strategy is. They're moving away from the sports card space. If you were trying to build out the sports card space, would you be sending out this email with this image? Would you be opening an office in Tokyo? Or would you be opening an office in China, where there's a huge demand for basketball cards, or Hong Kong, or somewhere in that area? But instead, they chose Tokyo. So, from like a corporate strategy perspective, their marketing materials, where they're opening offices, also suggest that they kind of realize, like, hey, it's kind of obvious where we're headed. Like, we're not making enough ground on the sports card space, so let's double down in the areas that we are making an impact in, and that's in the TCG and comic book space. And so that's the gist of the video. I think CGC, in terms of sports card grading, I think they're done. I think the big four is going to become the big three for sports card grading. And what's more interesting to me is I believe they started up the card grading business with two of the lead graders from Beckett a few years back. I don't know if they're still there, but did those two guys come over and create this division to look at TCG cards? Is this what excites them on a day-to-day basis? I don't know, but I if it were me and I had been at Beckett for many, many years and I'd been used to grading sports cards, and this is a thing that I really enjoyed doing, and I'm now looking at a bunch of Pokemon and TCG cards every day that don't really interest me, would I stay? Well, if I got paid enough, I probably would be, right? And if they're the heads, then maybe that is a reason for them to stay. But it does raise some interesting questions about whether or not those two individuals, and I don't know their names, I don't know anything about them, but I'm just kind of spitballing here, is will they stay there? I don't know. But it's something to think about in terms of, would you stay if this is going a way that's slightly different than what you might have first assumed when you first moved over there? Would love to hear your comments on this one. What do you think? Is the big four going to become the big three? Are all of these things warning signs that CGC is going to be done by the end of this year in terms of sports card grading? They might not fully shut it down, but in terms of how we talk about the big grading companies, will we just stop talking about CGC in the sports card category? Would love to hear your comments and thoughts in the comment section below. Thank you, as always, for listening and watching. I will talk to you all soon. Cheers.